Hello and welcome to the Why Wasn't It Better podcast. I am your host, Patrick Darms.
I'm your co-host, Anton Paras.
And we have some return guests with us, a duo who have appeared together on this podcast before and separately. Producer Eric Taylor and Kai Wang. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
It's our pleasure. This should be a lively discussion because, Eric, is this a second for you? The second time this has happened where you chose the film that we're discussing?
Was the first one The Lost World?
Yeah, way back in the beginning.
Yeah. I guess. Was I really the one that came up with this?
It was
I
always
think I just
on our
said
list.
to you.
It was on our list, but I think you saw it on the list and you're like, I want to do that soon.
Yeah,
Yes.
in the same way that you willed
Stop.
Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron.
Spirited Away Cinnamon Horse. You willed it into existence, whether you want to admit it or not, and it's on the record. The recording.
Wait, no.
states.
Pete Baldeo has at least part. It's partially his fault too. He was on the episode that caused that to happen. So
I mean, you can shift blame to him if you
stop.
choose to, but
But no, we have a very fun category of film today that we're doing outside of the typical spooky season.
yes, that's true, Anton. The whole genesis, besides Eric selecting this film, is that I got an email from a listener who I think rightfully asked, why do you only cover horror movies around Halloween? And I didn't have a good answer. So I thought, why not cover some summer horror? So of course we did one of the Jaws movies, which despite people clowning on them, they are horror movies. Anton reluctantly agrees with you. I guess it was kind of scary.
That's why I was afraid of
the second
ocean.
one was kind of scary, more hilarious, but
Yeah, we enjoyed Jaws too. We did.
we did.
Yeah, and just for the two of you who haven't seen Jaws 2, because I'm guessing neither of you have seen it, it's pretty good. It's better than
Yeah.
you'd think.
It is.
Does anyone have anything that they want to get off their chest before we introduce the film today and get right into this?
youtube.com/AI wait.
You want to redo that? You can't even spell
yeah,
your own
keep-
YouTube channel?
Yep,
Jeez.
keep-
No, because
keep
it's
plugging,
aliens in
keep
the
plugging.
doghouse.
Keep going.
Keep plugging.
AITDH. Because you want to know what the funny thing is? I didn't even make the YouTube channel. I just run it now. Yes.
Would you like me to make it easier for the listeners and just put it in the description?
Yes.
Okay.
If you could say.
Well,
I think I
We'll
have to
try-
at this point.
Please
We'll tag it wherever we can tag.
follow my channel, Aliens in the Doghouse. I work really hard. On the next thing is I think I told you the script for the next video is 61 pages long.
Wow.
Nice.
So I work really hard. All the comments have been great and super nice, but yeah, that's what I have to get off my chest.
Kai, anything you'd like to plug? Anything you want listeners to get on with your support, or anything you'd like to plug?
No, as usual, I'm just here for the love of the game and pure hate.
Okay. All right. Love the passion. Thank you.
So today's film that we're discussing today is Annihilation, which is based on a novel that is the first entry in what is known as the Southern Reach trilogy by Jeff Vandermeer. As I mentioned, this was always on our list, but thanks to you, Eric, it got accelerated. So the plot is as follows. Lena, a biologist and former soldier, joins a mission to uncover what happened to her husband inside Area X, a sinister and mysterious phenomenon that is expanding across the Florida coastline. Once inside, the expedition discovers a world of mutated landscapes and creatures, as dangerous as it is beautiful, that threatens both their lives and their sanity. Annihilation was released on February 23rd, 2018 by Skydance, DNA Films, Scott Rudin Productions, Hua Hua Media, no idea how to pronounce that, Paramount Pictures, and Netflix. It was written for the screen and directed by Alex Garland, based on the novel by Jeff Vandermeer, starring Natalie Portman, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Gina Rodriguez, Tessa Thompson, Tuva Novotny, and Oscar Isaac. The budget was $40 million, adjusted for inflation, that is $50 million. and the box office was only $43 million, adjusted for inflation. That is $54 million. So
that's criminal.
it is. We'll talk about that. I guess we can just go in order. And Eric, since this was originally your idea to cover, please tell us why, and then we can get to Kai, and he can talk about why he wanted to be on this episode. But Eric, kick us off. Why Annihilation?
This is one of, if not the number one movie for me personally. I'm not saying it's like a perfect film. You know, I'm not going to be able to kind of hide my cards here. I love this movie. I love everything about it. I watch it annually. It's a really great depiction of like confronting the unknown. And it's, I mean, that's why I wanted to cover it. I just think the concept is unique. I think it is unique enough compared to the book from what I know of the book. So that's kind of cool that you could still read the book and have a different story there. But yeah, man, it's just, and $40 million. I did not know it cost $40 million. This is a beautiful film. This is a beautiful movie. It's beautifully shot. The things that happen, even if they're scary. But yeah, so that's why I wanted to cover it.
And this is right up your alley, right? Like, you're a sci-fi guy. Tell the listeners about that.
I've always loved science fiction, but I've liked science fiction that really sort of either challenges you significantly or it uses science and uses just stuff like that. And this film sort of does. It plays into a lot of stuff, but you know, one of my other top movies is Arrival, because I think that is a unique depiction of what contacting alien life would actually be like. You know, as close as we could get, right? Because we've never seen aliens before. And I've realized recently, because I was talking to a buddy of mine about the music that I like, and I showed him some of it. He's like, this is really weird. I'm like, I just like weird stuff. The more out there it is, the more I appreciate its creativity. If that makes sense.
Definitely does.
So, but yeah, sci-fi. I love sci-fi. Especially, you know, all the stuff that's coming out now. Three Body Problem, The Expanse, Foundation. You know, it's a great time to be into sci-fi, and it's a pity because I think based on what you're telling me, and I hope we'll go into it, I don't know if a lot of people know this movie exists. You know, nobody knows about it when I tell them about it. You know,
no, you're right. We're gonna certainly talk about that. I think if you're into Alex Garland,
and he did that Civil War movie, right?
Recently.
That
recent
okay.
one, yeah.
That's okay.
He certainly has
so.
a following, like a major following. So I think if you're a fan of his, you are familiar with this movie. But yeah, we will talk about it absolutely. Mainstream audiences don't seem to know much about this film. Now, to turn over the coin that you were just talking about, Eric, Kai, you expressed a lot of interest in appearing on this episode. Why?
Well, I feel bad saying this after all the praise that Eric gave it, but I think this movie is terrible, and I cannot wait to dig into this movie.
That's interesting.
I initially watched with my wife in the theater because I thought the trailer looked really interesting, and like it. I'm not really a horror movie type of person because I don't like getting my heart rate up for no reason. But looking at the trailer, it just didn't seem all that scary. It looked more like unique, Lovecraftian than anything. Also, I like Natalie Portman and Oscar Isaacs. So I was like, yeah, I'll go check it out. I remember even like during the movie, I was like, man, what the fuck am I watching?
Wait, so you said you did see this in the theater?
I did, yeah.
Wow, okay.
Man.
Not many people did. And we're going to get into
me and
details
20 other
of
people
that.
watched this movie.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't in theaters for long. Anton, I didn't see this in theaters. I saw it when it debuted on Netflix about a month later. I was excited for it because I had seen Ex Machina, Alex Garland's first debut film as a director. I, of course, was familiar with him because, you know, he had written a couple of, I would say, pretty successful novels, at least one of which had been turned into a film a while back called The Beach, starring Leonardo DiCaprio. I really liked Ex Machina. when I saw this pop up on Netflix, I was excited for it. And, to Kai's point, Natalie Portman, Oscar Isaac, the other actors involved, it's a really good cast. It got really good reviews, 88% on Rotten Tomatoes, and yet it made no money when it came out. And as Eric was getting into, not a lot of people seem to know about this movie. What about you, Anton? What's your experience with it?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a fan of Alex Garland for a long time just because of the 28 Days series, 28 weeks, years now. And I was recommended the film by a friend that did see it in theaters. I didn't make it out to go see it in theaters. I love horror. I love sci-fi. I love the mix of the two. One of my favorite films of all time is The Thing, which I found has so many similarities with this film in the story and in the execution. And so I'm really interested in talking about the film. I'm holding my cards a bit closer to the vest. So I'm really excited to hear, both your takes, Eric and Kai, on this film. And I'll say this: I'm excited for more Alex Garland in Hollywood.
I second you on that. He's certainly a unique storyteller and a unique filmmaker. Yeah, this should be a lively discussion. I don't know that we've ever had two guests who so openly declared their feelings for a film like this.
Oh, no. There was one time for Spirit Stallion of the Cinnamon Roll, and you all ganged up on me because I didn't really like it.
I thought you just didn't really like Bryan Adams.
So I don't want to get into it. That was
Anton, you're talking about one of the finest pop artists of the 20th century, Bryan Adams.
Oh my God! Okay,
Grammy Award-winning artist Bryan Adams.
Listen, bud, you need a darker shade of those rose-colored glasses. Okay, listen. I'll make a different cut. But anyway, I had an opinion that was different, and y'all told me I was wrong. So first time on the podcast, I'm going to respect your opinion, Kai. Your opinion is your own. I'm actually eager to hear what you have to say so that maybe I will look at it in a different way, like the nice guy I am. Anyway.
Well, I feel like that's the best we can all hope for in this situation, Anton, why don't you read the production history for us?
Paramount and Scott Rudin acquired the film rights to Annihilation before Jeff Vandermeer had even published a novel in 2013. Alex Garland was hired to direct after the producers saw his film Ex Machina. Garland explained that his adaptation was necessarily based on only the first novel in the trilogy. Quote, "At the point I started working on Annihilation, there was only one of the three books. I knew that it was planned as a trilogy by the author, but there was only the manuscript for the first book. I really didn't think too much about the trilogy side of it." End quote. He said his adaptation is a, quote, a memory of the book, and that rather than book reference screenwriting with the intention of capturing the dreamlike nature and tone of his experience reading Vandermeer's novel. Rather than trying to directly adapt the book, Garland took the story in his own direction with Vandermeer's permission. He deliberately avoided reading the next two books as he did not want them to influence his script. Now, Natalie Portman was the first cast member to sign on, and Frances McDormand was considered for the role of Dr. Ventress before Jennifer Jason Leigh was cast.
So production was set to begin in early 2016, and a decision was made to accommodate Portman's schedule, which also meant that the film would be shot during Gina Rodriguez's break from filming the series Jane the Virgin. Despite being set in the Florida Panhandle, it was actually filmed in England beginning in April 2016 at Windsor Great Park. And I thought that was really interesting because that is the forest near Windsor Castle, which I didn't even know they filmed movies there. So I got to say right off the bat, they did a great job of making it look like Florida, because I'm assuming the area around Windsor Castle doesn't really look like Florida.
I'm kind of shocked that it wasn't.
Right?
Yeah.
I thought it was shot in wetlands.
Right.
Of the United States.
I guess I can understand why, because Garland is English. He probably just found it easier to work in England. I don't know. But it was also filmed at Holcombe Pines in Norfolk, which is another part of England. Shooting wrapped up in July, so pretty quick shoot, about 90 days. After a test screening that went badly, Skydance CEO David Ellison was unhappy with the film, and he called it, quote, too intellectual and too complicated. He thought it wouldn't appeal to wider audiences. Among other things, he wanted the ending changed, as well as making Portman's character more sympathetic. Garland refused because he had Final Cut privilege, and producer Scott Rudin sided with Garland. The disagreements grew so contentious that Paramount ended up inking a deal with Netflix, who would distribute the film internationally. It was only released theatrically in the United States and China, nowhere else. That's really strange.
Seriously.
Garland expressed his disappointment with the decision to coincide digital distribution with theatrical, saying, quote, we made the film for cinema, end quote. It debuted on Netflix about a month after it was released in theaters, so that can kind of bring us right into the first discussion point of why wasn't it better, which is the box office performance. I'm certainly glad that Garland stuck to his guns and didn't change anything, but I do want to come back to what the Skydance CEO David Ellison said. It's too intellectual and too complicated. I agree with him. This is not something that is going to appeal to mainstream audiences, but that certainly doesn't make it a good or a bad film.
Yeah, because just to look at it from Allison's perspective, finding mass appeal and watering down stories a bit is his job. It's what's going to put the most butts in seats, and I don't think that the film itself is entirely digestible for a wide audience.
I kind of want to relate this to something I heard somebody in the music industry say, and I think it applies to film too, especially when you have this need to make pretty obscene amounts of profit in order to justify making a movie, right? Because that 40 million that we talked about, that doesn't include marketing budgets, if there were any, because it doesn't sound like there was
doesn't sound like there was much.
But it's still, that's more money that, like, you know, they need to make back. He was like, the fact that we're allowing consumers to dictate what the art is, that has sort of devalued the art itself, music, movies. Because the point that he made, the fashion industry, right? They'll give you something weird and you'll just accept it. You know what I mean? Like, the fashion industry does weird things and people will accept it. Sometimes they don't. You know, it's not a perfect analogy, but, you know, I get exactly what he said, but the Oscars just happened and I've never heard of the movie that won a bunch of Oscars.
Anora.
You know what I mean?
Anora?
Yeah.
Anora?
I've literally never heard of it. I also don't have my finger on the pulse in terms of new cinema, right?
It was a good movie.
Apparently, but, you know, not that I really trust the Academy for that. Same way I don't trust Rotten Tomatoes for that, right? But I don't know. I kind of got off topic, but
No, I hear what you're saying, Eric. I think with the statement, it can still be mutually true, or it's not mutually exclusive that that the trajectory of films are meant to match a trend versus being trend setting. And this is just an example of the big company Paramount has a goal to make money with their films. In the same way, a production company like Neon Films can take a risk on a film like Anora and it still does well, despite kind of having a very different concept of film than what is more typical with a big budget. So I just think it's taking the medium and then packaging it for either a wide audience or a small audience. It just so happened this was a big studio funding a very out there film.
Out there is the right way to put it, because if you're the studio and you're just going to the script, right, or you're going to the source material, the novel, maybe they were banking on Alex Garland, the name, being a selling point, because by that point, Ex Machina had been a really well-received film, and maybe they were thinking this guy might draw people to the movie. But look, I didn't read the novel, but reading the synopsis and having seen this film a couple times, I would have been shocked if this was a big box office hit. This is just not the kind of movie that is going to make hundreds of millions of dollars. This is a movie that, if you're not into sci-fi at all, or you're not into horror at all, like this is not going to appeal to you at all. This is the opposite of a 4-quadrant movie. This is not something that kids can appreciate or watch. It's obviously not appropriate for kids, but it's not even like, if I had seen this movie when I was 10 years old, I would have been probably pretty bored by it. So I don't know what they were expecting. Like, I don't understand what they were looking at if they were evaluating this film before it was released and thinking it would be a hit.
It didn't feel like a Paramount film either.
No.
And correct me if I'm wrong, though. Like I've seen Ex Machina. It's shocking that I've actually seen a movie.
Well, it's a sci-fi movie. It's not shocking to me.
So but I don't. Again, for mainstream audiences, I don't think somebody would have, the average person would have been like, oh, Alex Garland, like, I'll go see this movie. I just think that's weird calculus from the studio. I'm not disagreeing necessarily with it, but
I'm glad you brought that up. Do any of you know how much money Ex Machina made at the box office?
Profit or gross?
Just gross. Throw out a number.
It made
5 to 10 million.
double
Double
that. I'll say double.
Okay.
Kai, any guesses?
I said 150 million, but that sounds like it's way too high.
It is. It made $37 million.
You were closer in time.
So it is interesting but that film, I feel like a lot more people have seen it than this. This technically made less money than Annihilation. It obviously made more profit.
I would say I know it's been referenced a lot of times.
Yeah,
like
it won an Oscar and it was
and
nominated
stuff.
for other ones, so it got the awards attention too, which always helps.
Yeah. It was released by the studio that I would have associated Annihilation with, A24. So just
great point.
So just kind of interesting that maybe there's a different distribution strategy if you're A24 versus Paramount for a film like this.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because this would have felt much more at home under A24's umbrella.
A24 does make more like weird out there movies.
Yep. They are willing to take risks. I mean, that was the same umbrella for Civil War.
Right. That is Garland's highest grossing film. That made about $130 million. So not a tremendous amount of money. He doesn't do box office, right? He's not that kind of filmmaker.
Right.
Yeah. It's fair to say he doesn't think how many millions of dollars will this make. He truly I would say he probably does see it as more of a art.
Well, completely agree. Yeah.
Well, having a good self-awareness of knowing if this doesn't do well, I won't get funded.
Right.
I also understand why this didn't do well with test audiences because, I mean, I'm of the belief to truly appreciate a movie, you have to see it more than once. But this, I think more than a lot of films we cover on this podcast, Anton, this is a movie that if you only see once, it leaves something to be desired. This is, and I'm not saying that to knock this film, but the more you see this movie, the more you take it in and notice and appreciate things about its plot.
Well, I want to take this moment to go to, Kai, and wanted your perspective. You touched on it a little bit, your reaction seeing it for the first time. 2 questions for me. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that first reaction seeing it in theaters? And 2, how many times have you seen it since?
Sure. So the first time I saw it in theaters, I just remember thinking, if this is supposed to be a horror movie, I don't think it's that scary. I'd say the scariest moment in the entire movie is probably the bear in the cabin thing. And even then I was like, I mean, beyond the weird scream that the bear was doing, like it wasn't really that scary. Plus I think initially I found the plot a little bit hard to follow at times. I was trying to figure out obviously they were referencing cancer and stuff in the beginning, so I was like, okay, like maybe this Zone X is like a physical manifestation of cancer or something like that. But then when we got to the end and then like the guy in the aluminum foil suit appeared, I was like, I have no idea like what is going on here anymore. And then she made him blow itself up, and I was like, okay. And then I just remember leaving the movie and being like, man, I have no idea like what I just watched. And then I didn't really think about it much for the next couple of years. I rewatched it 2 nights ago. And I pretty much had the same exact reaction throughout. I was just like, man, like, what are we doing here? Like, this is, as a horror movie, it's not that scary. As a science fiction movie, there's not enough sci-fi in it as a drama, I'm trying to figure out in what way Natalie Portman's character is sympathetic.
It's not. She kind of sucks, huh?
Yeah, like I'm like, okay, so you drove your husband to his death. Okay, great. Yeah, and then like I keep coming back to how ridiculous the entity at the lighthouse is, because I'm like, you look like a guy in a foil suit. I will say,
Mm-hmm.
the visuals are top notch. Like I think that the
music too.
yeah,
the music
and the visuals
sound
are top notch.
design.
Like
Music is so good.
the way the fused animals look is really great. The way even the alien lair at the end looks very Geiger-esque. I like that a lot. Yeah, obviously Natalie Portman's in it, which is great. I remember too. There's a scene in the movie where she uses night vision goggles to like look into the distance, and all I could think was, if you have night vision goggles, why don't you just put them on a helmet so you can like walk around with it on or something?
And that scene too, I will say, it's one of those instances, and it happens in so many movies, it happens in so many video games, where it's like, you guys are sitting here and telling me you didn't hear that bear walking up to you before it attacked and dragged that lady away. I sort of give it a bad, because dude, it happens so much. It happens in so much media where it's like, you didn't hear this guy coming.
I actually thought that was one of the most realistic parts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because a lot in real life, when people get attacked by animals, they almost never hear it coming.
Gotcha. Also, Kai, I just wanted to bring up, and I realized if you see it much more when you see the test shots of the bear, because I was watching it again, and I was like, some of it is like freaking Battle of Winterfell levels of darkness. If you look at the bear, the woman's face is in the side of the bear.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, not only was her voice melded into the bear's face, like, because once you notice it, it's like, because one of the eyes is the bear's eye, and it's like, look, I don't know. I just think that's really well done. There's a bit of body horror too, and like the intestines and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I mean, I understand not liking that.
No,
typically,
I actually enjoyed that a lot, and I think the found footage of them cutting the guy's stomach open and then seeing this, and then seeing him later, like what he mutated into, I was like, that's pretty cool. But I just feel like it doesn't do any like one thing really well. It's like trying to be multiple categories while like not really excelling at any
I would
of
also,
them, I guess.
And not to get too far down a rabbit trail here, but I would say if you left the film feeling confused, then I think that's the intent, right? Because they walk through the boundary of the shimmer, right, and then they wake up. You're like, yeah. What's happening? I think that it's supposed to start to get confusing and weird, especially towards the end, because that's you're sort of feeling what the characters are feeling as they go through this story.
So guys, I think we got to take a step back. These concepts, these like the fun of going down the rabbit hole for these very cool concepts, this is not what a Paramount executive thinks is going to sell like seats in a theater.
No.
Like, look,
yeah.
When I think of like Paramount, when I think of Universal, like what kind of movie are they putting out in the summer for horror? They're going to put out a movie about a really scary nun, and the nun might eat you or something. They're going to put out something.
$500 million.
Yeah, or just, it's very simple concepts for horror. This is not that. Okay, so I think like that's a very clear reason why they pivoted their strategy with this film.
I still think it could have done better at the box office if it was marketed to the appropriate.
If they gave it a real theatrical release, yeah. But they only released it in the United States and China, and then they pulled it after only a month. It had no chance.
They didn't believe in it.
They didn't believe in it.
Which I do think, and I agree with you, Eric. Like if there was more of an effort, I think this would have had way bigger appeal. Just because there is a lot in this film that takes inspiration from horror greats, sci-fi greats, that resonates with a lot of people. And I think that with a lot more care, this would have been picked up even more with longer distribution and better marketing. So I definitely put it on the studio on this one for lack of box office.
Anton, would you say this is Kubrickian?
Ooh, I can see that. Or I've seen also Cronenbergian,
Lynchian?
very Lynchian.
Because of the dreamy stuff, the dreamy nature of it.
Yeah.
Right?
I think we can get into the story now if this is where we're going with this. Because the dreamlike quality, I think, is where this is most effective for me, because I agree with you, Kai. Like, as a pure horror movie, it's not scary enough for me, but I did find it quite effective just because of how unsettling it is, where you're just, the whole time you're watching the movie, you're just uncomfortable. Just like those, the group of the five. Well, they're not all scientists, right? One of them is a paramedic. Gina Rodriguez's character is a paramedic, right?
A scientist paramedic.
Right. Scientifically,
Yeah.
Yeah, but like you mentioned, when they enter the shimmer, and then how long did they say? They're like, well, based on our rations, we've been in here like 3 days.
About 4 days.
Yeah, that's nuts. Like that's. I was trying to put myself in those shoes and how freaked out you'd be if you found that out.
I told my wife it's funny that they were like, especially what's her name? Rodriguez, you said?
Yeah, is her character's name Anya?
Yeah. She was like, oh well, what? Don't know where those 4 days went. And like, that is the mentality you'd have to have if you wanted to even have a hope of surviving. And I told my wife that. I was like, you would just have to be like, the more you thought about it, the worse it would have been. You know what I mean? And it's like, I don't know. I just thought that was interesting because, and of course, Ventress was like, yeah, we're just going. We're oriented. We're not talking about it anymore.
There's a theory out there that since Ventress is a psychologist, she might have did something to the group to make them forget about the last couple of days.
I think that happens in the book.
So Ventress intentionally is manipulating the situation.
Yeah, because her goal is to get to the lighthouse. I think if people are weirded out initially, then they're going to want to leave. So I think part of Ventress's goal was to prevent people from doing that.
Yeah, I mean, she was definitely a psycho from like minute one.
Yeah.
The second you meet her, when Natalie Portman, when Lena wakes up, and we're like, well, this woman's crazy.
Which, by the way, Jennifer Jason Leigh's great at playing those characters.
She's great in this movie. It's a great role.
Ice cold. She's ice cold for a psychologist. Like, I thought the characters were in.
I agree with you. I think they're all well acted. They're all well written. I'm sure a lot of other reviews have pointed this out, but I never once felt like, wow, they're all women. That's weird.
Yeah.
They're just well written, normal characters.
And it's not even that. It's like there is a canonical reason why they're all women. All the other groups that have been sent in have been men. When you're dealing with something that you literally cannot comprehend, they don't know what to do. Like at a certain point, you're going to be like, yeah, we're just going to throw everything at it. Like, all dudes have been going in. Well, let's try.
Yeah. That's why they send an all-woman team in. I think the book, my understanding is that the book mentions that, but they don't mention this in the film. But that makes sense. They're just trying. To your point, they're just trying to put anything they can into the shimmer to see what works.
What was the name of their operation again? Like the actual mission?
I don't know. I know it's called the Southern. Like, the organization is the Southern Reach. But
I was just trying to remember because like I forget if in the comic or if it was in the book, it was just Operation Chicks Rule. And
I don't think they called it that in the movie.
Yeah.
I would, dude, that would have docked the score for me a little bit.
Yeah, no, and of course I'm being completely in jest.
Right.
No, I totally agree with you, Pat. Like, it's just really well done writing, and it's one of the things that I like that with, I'd say, a majority of Alex Garland's film. You can really count on very plausible situations being put together.
Yeah, all the dialogue feels natural. I wrote down multiple times watching this movie, this is the intellectual alien movie Prometheus wanted to be.
You were talking about that, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone knows this. I hate that movie. It sucks.
It's a good episode. It's a good episode. If you haven't heard it, go back and.
Did you guys ever watch Event Horizon?
Yeah.
Yes, it's a horrible movie.
Yeah, to me, this was a look at the self-destructive nature of humans in a much more effective way than Event Horizon ever did.
That's a freaky movie, though. I'll give it that.
Oh, yeah. It's funny that you say that because it is sort of, it's kind of a comment on that, no? Like, this thing shows up and just starts changing its environment. It's not unlike people,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I guess, you know what else this reminded me of? Again, I think it's better than it. You ever see Sphere?
Yeah.
I haven't.
The Michael Crichton novel?
Yeah, I mean, the novel's really good. The
novel's really good. The movie not so much.
The movie's like disaster level bad.
It's not Congo, but...
I would argue Congo's more entertaining.
Yeah, because of the gorilla.
Yeah. And Tim Curry.
Ooh, good times.
If you haven't seen Sphere, don't. It's not worth it. Eric,
No,
you
really
like the book. I mean, you like The Lost World and Jurassic Park.
Oh, yeah.
Same author,
I
obviously.
like Michael Crichton.
Yeah.
He's a good writer. But yeah, I'm trying to think.
Yeah, so the story's concrete. It reminds me of like a very eerie survival horror video game, but I can definitely say from a pacing perspective, sometimes I felt like it was building up tension a bit too much with not a lot of payoff.
It felt longer than it was.
It's so funny because I always felt the pacing was like really good, and maybe because like part of the reason I like horror movies and not like slashers necessarily, but like horror movies and horror video games is because like let's be real, I do not encounter very many stressful situations, in my life. Like, so I think it was Kai mentioned like getting his heart rate up. That's how I do it. You know what I mean? Like I like my life is pretty calm, pretty boring, and I don't like. Yeah, I'm not gonna go skydiving anytime soon. So this is kind of how I get that adrenaline rush. So, and the whole like feeling on edge, I do get that. But again, I think that's sort of part of the storytelling. Like you are feeling what these characters feel. If you were there, that anxiety would not let up, probably no matter what. But yeah, I thought it was paced well. But again, maybe I have rose-colored glasses.
No,
for
I mean,
the 2018 movie.
Pacing is what you make of it. Kai, this is where I think I'll side with you a little bit. The drama side to this, I didn't understand the point of including Lena's affair.
I think it was to give Oscar Isaac a reason to like want to go on the mission or something like that. And I think you guys are right. There is an underlying theme here of like self-destruction. So that's probably part of it. But like, I feel like it came out of like it was hinted at in the beginning of the movie, but I still feel like it kind of came out of nowhere. For how well written the dialogue is, I don't feel like we get enough backstory on anyone ever. Like we just know like basic facts about them, but like we don't really know much about them beyond like a couple sentences.
So something I will say, I reconnected with somebody who, they went into the military and everything, and they have a significant other. We wound up at the same wedding together, and I was talking to him and her, and he often goes on missions where she doesn't know where he's going. She doesn't know who he's going with, and I think him going, I'm kind of saying I agree with you because he could have just gone to go. I mean, he was a soldier, and this is something that endangers America. Like I think you're right. He could have just gone to go and not tell her anything. And it did always irk me a little bit that was part of the story. And I honestly didn't even remember the amount of times that I've seen this movie. I didn't remember that he found out.
They never explicitly say he found out, but it's like heavily implied.
It's implied when she's talking to the other professor for like the last time.
The guy she's banging.
Yeah.
Yeah, she says
that,
he knows, but he never brings it up. There's no indication from him.
Mm-mm.
What's his name? Kane?
Because I don't think he blames her.
It's not.
If he's always
not,
away, I mean, like,
not clear.
it's not. And like I said, that's probably the weakest part of the story for me, because I think it would be just as plausible that he was like, this is a threat to our nation, potentially the world. I'm going to go because it's my job. That's what I do. I'm not 100% why the affair plot line was thrown in. And also the guy invites her to a cookout or a barbecue at his house with his wife in the beginning of the movie. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Like, how? What?
Kind of awkward.
He doesn't give a fuck.
No, he does not care. Hey, like, I know we had this affair and it was weird, but would you like to come
Yeah.
to my house and meet my wife?
So awkward.
So that was weird. I'll acquiesce to that.
You know, I just feel like that plotline added a lot of time, added quite a bit of time to the movie that didn't have to be there, and it also played into like the going back and forth in time thing, which I didn't quite enjoy either, because it was constantly like post movie stuff where they're talking to Wang. I'm gonna call him Wang because that's what I remember him as, and stuff that happened in the past before the husband deployed. So it was a little bit hard to follow at times.
I think you're right, because I've seen this movie a few times now, and it was like the second or third time. I thought she was having an affair with the guy while her husband was away.
That's what I thought at first too,
Yeah.
but it's not.
And then it gets revealed later, like, no, she had been having an affair, and then he allegedly found out, and then he goes away on the mission, but he was going away on other missions before that, so still not sure what the point of that was.
I think this is going to sound kind of weird that when they go into the shimmer also sort of starts to torment them a little bit, which I think is common in these like Lovecraftian things, right? Because if you notice, the house that they shack up in is a copy of the house that she left, the house that she lived in with Cain.
I didn't know
It's just
that.
it's covered in vines. If you look at it again, it's the same layout, the stairs into the kitchen, living room over here. It's a copy of something that's in her head. So the shimmer isn't just projecting things and refracting things, but that's why maybe it's also kind of, I don't want to say the shimmer has like intent, because I'm not positive it does, but we'll get into that later, I guess. But it's refracting everything and maybe amplifying the guilt that Natalie Portman has, you know. And this might just be me overly like defending the movie, and I'll acknowledge that, but it's interesting how, and it shows the building, and if you pay attention, you're like, oh, that's her house. Why is her house in the shimmer, you know? And I think it was intentional. I don't think they just reused an asset, you know.
No,
not
I'm
in a
sure
film,
it was.
not in a film like this. So
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I wish we had gotten a little bit less of the extramarital affair and a little bit more of, I thought there was a couple scenes missing. Like, I'll give you a good example. Right after Cassie gets taken by the bear, it just cuts to the next morning, and like Ventress is like, well, I'm going to go to the lighthouse, and then Anya goes crazy. It's like, and I was like left wondering, like, did they go to sleep after she got taken by the bear? Were they up all night? Did they look for her? They look for her the next morning, obviously, when Lena finds her body, but it felt really abrupt to me.
Agree.
Do you think that's just more of a intentional choice for the dreamlike quality of this whole journey, or just
I suppose
not
so.
great, or just not great? Like, which of the two?
I wonder if they cut something out.
Yeah.
That particular instance, while we could use that as like a Band-Aid excuse, I don't think, if that's what they were intending, it was done very well. But it is confusing, and I'm wondering if, because it was traumatic, it's sort of like when your brain goes through something traumatic, like a car accident or something like that, and then like you can't quite remember it. Like, you could kind of remember it starting, but you don't really remember what happens after. Again, these are all excuses, not reasons. You know what I mean?
They wouldn't even have had to like put in an extra scene if they just had it. Like, they just needed to add like a line that said like, "Oh wow, we went and looked for her the whole night. We couldn't find her."
Yeah.
Oh well. Like, I think that would have made the transition less abrupt from Cassie to, I'm going to the lighthouse now.
Yeah. I mean, I do get why Ventress was like, well, She gone.
She did
Like,
not care.
She
at
got
all.
got.
Well, that's not, Ventress wasn't there to make sure they all got out alive.
No.
I mean, in Ventress's mind, they all knew what they signed up for.
We'll talk about Ventress a little bit later. I have questions.
Okay.
I also have questions about after they killed a mutant alligator, which is pretty scary, right?
Mhm.
Let's just get on these tiny rowboats
Oh, yeah.
and make our way up the river. Hopefully there's just one of these mutant alligators. Good thing we killed the only one.
I think, and again, this might be like something that was cut out. They made it seem, or when you watch them discover the boats, and she goes, "Oh, like mode of transport." Maybe they were starting to get to a point in the marshland where like the boats were the only way they could really get across. But yeah, that's not what I would have done.
No. Look, maybe
Just
their
hop
judgment
on.
was like starting to slip away. But I think like a line of dialogue could have worked there. Like, you're right, Eric. Like, well, like we don't want to go on these boats, but like this is the only way to get to where we need to go. We don't have a choice.
Or like, we're really tired from walking. These boats are going to be faster. You know what I mean? Like something. Anything.
Yeah, any context clues, because even the lines of dialogue, a lot of times I'll complain about too much exposition, but expository dialogue has its place. It fits really well sometimes. Here, there was just not even enough context clues visually. You're just left guessing.
Right.
Now, I do think for a lot of this film, it's very intentional. It is put on the viewer to connect the dots however they want to interpret, which either you love it or you hate it, I think.
That's something I had to keep reminding myself, Anton, is like the entire thing, the entire story is being told from Lena's POV. It's basically a flashback, right? She's just recollecting all of the events during this debriefing.
Right.
And of course, you always have to fall into the question of, is she a reliable narrator?
Was that Mulholland Drive the one? It was the film where it's basically a full recollection, or was that Blue Velvet? I'm trying to remember.
I was thinking that was Rising Sun, and I'm a little upset that you didn't think of that immediately. But
that's true. That is Rising Sun.
Yep.
That's a good point.
To answer your question seriously, I think it's Mulholland Drive.
Yeah, and so it's just been such a long time since I've seen the film, but so many similarities to that film, especially with the consideration of an unreliable narrator. So that turns all of the dreamlike qualities that we see in the film also open for interpretation, which, Pat, you said it earlier, very Lynchian in nature.
Where she keeps saying, I don't know. They're like, well, what was it? A carbon-based life form? I don't know.
Well, and it's funny too. She says, for the people who she legitimately doesn't know what happened to them, she's like, I don't know. But she will say if somebody died, because we don't really know what happened to the girl. I mean, she probably turned into a tree, but
yeah, maybe.
We don't know. She rounded a corner and then she was gone.
That's line of the year. What happened to her? She turned into a tree.
She turned into a tree.
I have a question for all of you about that. Like, were her and Ventress, what's the character's name played by Tessa Thompson? Josie. Did they just
Valkyrie?
go full blown? Did they just go full blown crazy? Where she's like, I just want to turn into a tree.
So
yeah.
Okay.
So here's the other thing that if you really pay attention, I think you notice it a little bit. As time goes on, I keep calling her Natalie Portman, but her character, and even at the end, it's sort of, her character starts taking on traits of all the other people that are there. Like at the end, she has the tattoo, right? And it starts when she's still with everyone. So all of them are getting sort of jumbled together as they move through the shimmer. So I think that would make somebody go crazy if, say, she says like, my fingerprints are moving, and we see that. Normally if somebody sees their fingerprints moving, they're gonna like, oh, you're going crazy. But this is stuff that's really happening, which would also make somebody go crazy. And are her intestines moving around like that guy that basically got attached to the wall of the pool? I think you'd go a little insane if you were dealing with that kind of stuff.
You would, and that's why I'm a little more forgiving to this story because it's deliberately doing this to you. You're supposed to keep guessing, even if at times it's infuriating. Kai, go ahead.
I took it as Josie. I think she realized that she was not likely to like make it out alive, and she saw what happened to the other people who like turned into trees, and she was like, "All right, this is my fate now. I'm gonna go turn into a tree now."
For me, that was the most effective visual images from the film. The human shaped plants, and I gotta say, this film, for all of its credit, a lot of the imagery just stays with you. This has just a tremendous amount of staying power, and maybe it doesn't have a lot of traditional horror movie tropes to it. There's a few jump scares here and there, right? Like the alligator attack, the bear attack. They're very effective scenes, I think. The found footage stuff is certainly creepy, but I think all of the imagery is by far the most effective piece of storytelling about this film.
Yeah,
I like the elements. Sorry, I was going to say the word haunting came to mind.
I was gonna say I really like the deers with the flowers in the antlers when Lena went to go look for Cassie. That's probably my favorite scene in the movie, actually, when she sees them and then they look up at her and then they run away.
Weren't those Pokemon?
Stanlers.
Yeah.
No, not Stanler. What's the Swasbucks? Yeah.
Okay.
The deer that have the trees on them.
Yeah.
Deerling and then Swasbuck. Anyway,
wait. I figured it out.
One thing that I will say, what?
Annihilation is ground zero for Pokemon.
Yeah,
man.
There you go. But real quick before I forget this, what I realized about the deer was it was hinting at what the lighthouse scene was, and the aluminum man, as you call him, Kai. Because if you notice, the second deer looks a bit more decrepit, almost like it was copying what that first deer became, because they mention about echoes and stuff like that. So, and when they move at the exact same time, same as Natalie Portman and the Aluminum Man. So what I think that scene, like, while it's beautiful, I think it was trying to hint at what this thing is. Again, I don't want to say trying to do, but what this thing's purpose is. But again, this was just something that I thought about in my most recent viewing, because they move very similar to how the doppelganger thing moves at the end of the movie.
Yeah, you're right. I think that's a good call out.
Thank you. It's like 10 viewings, dude. It's so sad how many times I've seen this movie.
It's not sad. Do you know how many times I've seen Moonraker, which Kai hated?
You gotta, it's we're never one to, judge on personal preference. You like what you like. It's just there's a lot of things here where it's tough to see a film that's very unique be held back by things out of its own power. So that's tough to see. But I will say that, just kind of one of the elements that for this kind of like story that I think also is tough for a wide audience is just kind of it's a bit of a bummer story.
What are you talking about, dude? The two lovers are embraced at the end of the film.
Reunite.
Right. They reunite. Yeah. Everything's fine. I don't know what you're talking about.
Totally just saved.
I was totally into
the girl who inflicted self-harm turned into a tree. I think the only person that didn't win was the two people who had their throats and jaws ripped out respectively. But that's sacrifices got to be made. Yeah, those are minor things.
I got to look at this glass half full.
Yeah.
Despite playing a completely unlikable character, I actually think this is one of my favorite Natalie Portman performances.
Better than the Natalie Portman rap with the Lonely Island.
That was pretty great.
Does anybody? Please tell me you guys know.
Of course,
yeah, that was
good.
That is.
Natalie Portman's not shy from playing roles of characters that are unlikable or questionable moral dilemmas. She got her Oscar for Black Swan, and that's where she really showed that a lot of that.
That's a horror movie, right?
I think so.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
this was a bit more. It felt different from her role in Black Swan, almost more grounded.
it's not the most unlikable character she's played, right? I mean, she did play a woman who married a man who committed mass murder of children, as we know.
She was a groomer in that movie.
She
Yes.
was. You know, because as we know, what does she say very famously? To be angry is to be human.
Is to be human.
It's
It's okay. You killed an entire race of people.
yeah. He's like, not just the men, the women, and the children. I killed them all. And she's like, to be angry is to be human. So yeah, she's played unlikable characters before, but I think she's great here. And the thing that really sells it for me is she manages to play someone who's both a former soldier and a scientist, which I feel is pretty hard to pull off. A lot of actors are, I think, rather good at doing one or the other, and she's totally believable as someone who was in the army and became a scientist, and you never question it. There's a lot of brilliance in being able to pull something like that off.
Do you think she could play Santa's head of security?
100%, yeah.
What is that referencing?
Are you talking about The Rock?
Yeah.
That's Red One, right?
Red One.
Oh my god.
I'm trying to think, what else could she be?
Well, thank you for making light of my point at a time, but yeah.
No, it's.
I'm kidding.
Sorry,
I'm kidding.
I just had to think of crazy roles and people losing themselves in those roles.
In the beginning, when she's talking to her class about cancer, like, it's believable. And then when she's shooting the alligator with the rifle, it's believable. I just feel like there's not a lot of actors that can pull off those two different things.
She was pretty badass.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great performance from everyone, I would say.
I think what also sold it for me is there wasn't anything asked of her character that would be outside of that same scope of believability. Like, she wasn't the best fighter, right? But she had the same capability to either get herself out of a situation if it got too hairy, and then also exhibited the right traits that would, again, be believable in the role. So I know what you're saying.
Yeah, she had a lot of, like, tactical awareness. Although I do find it funny how, what's the other, Cassie, is that the character that gets the first one to be mauled by the bear? She's like, where'd you learn to shoot like that? And it's like, so they just gave them all rifles, and do the rest of them like not know how to shoot?
Well, they were carrying the right. If you notice before they go into the shimmer, all of them aren't like touching the trigger. And I know that's Babytown frolics about like handling guns, right? You never put your finger on the trigger. But I would imagine, because they've been there for so long, that they've sort of been trained up at the Southern Reach facility.
I would hope.
For this. They just didn't need to train Natalie Portman because they knew.
I would hope.
Sure, you knew.
It's a better plan than here's an M4. Good luck. I gotta say, few films have sent me down a rabbit hole like this. I have watched a bunch of YouTube videos. I have been on I don't know how many message boards. There's no consensus here either.
It's just fun to. I think that's the fun of it, right? You kind of interpret however you want to. It feels like I'm an English AP all over again.
I was just talking about this with somebody today. Like, the reason why I enjoyed philosophy classes and why everyone else in the class hated the philosophy classes is because, like, somebody would ask a question and the teacher would be like, that question is a really good question. And people would get so mad. And I'm like, well, not all questions have answers, and not all questions have answers that we can entirely comprehend. You know, I mean, this isn't anything new. This is Lovecraftian stuff, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Stuff beyond our comprehension.
Well, to be fair though, in that same like college class, there's probably frustration because the other question after is that, will this be on the test? So one thing there was, what I noticed was, it's not about getting the right answer. It's about defending your perspective. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Less so than saying like, we had to study philosophers and answer questions about philosophers. Like, that was on the test. But when we got into those deeper, bigger, stuff, I don't know. I get why people hate it.
Yeah.
I totally understand. I'm not defending it whatsoever. I'm just saying, again, I liked it. Like this movie. I liked it. I can totally understand why people wouldn't. But,
Kai, your thoughts?
Sorry, about which part specifically?
Oh, I don't know. I just any of them.
I guess so. So I actually want to go back to what the CEO said about the intellectual part. I don't know if I'm dumb, but like I'm struggling to understand which part of this might have been too intellectual for like people to understand.
It is sort of like sci-fi jargon. It's not real.
I think if anything is hard to follow, it's like
Yeah.
the
I think
general
more the
plot,
symbolism
maybe.
and stuff
I
might have
think
turned him off.
I think him using even the word intellectual was just a kind way of saying, I think that this isn't too cookie cutter. It isn't cookie cutter enough. So even not necessarily that it's too smart of a film, because I agree with you, Kai. Like, I don't think that there aren't any concepts that wouldn't be too hard to grasp after you give it some thought. It's just, it's not a cookie cutter horror film. It's not a cookie cutter sci-fi horror film.
That's fair.
There's so many theories on this movie, and after about an hour of digging into this, I just gave up because I realized there is no consensus. And what set me over the edge is I clicked on a YouTube video, it's called something like Alex Garland explains the ending of Annihilation. And when I clicked on it, I was like, oh, great. The director will shed light on everything that I want to know, and I can go into this podcast episode super prepared. And it was a total clickbait bullshit. Garland did not explain the ending at all. He was just explaining his motivations when writing the film, which it was interesting enough, right? But I realized because this is apparently so different than the novel and it's meant to be a standalone story, there's not supposed to be a sequel to this. It is very much open to interpretation, and one of the best explanations that I was at least satisfied with is someone told me, look up the other meaning of the word annihilation, because my understanding of the word annihilation was that it just means like total destruction. I didn't know it had another meaning. And it is as follows, quote, the conversion of matter into energy, especially the mutual conversion of a particle and an antiparticle into electromagnetic radiation, end quote. Now, I don't know what an antiparticle is, but the first part of that, which is the conversion of matter into energy, I can certainly see a lot of that in this film, particularly in the ending. So I don't know that it certainly didn't answer all the questions I've had about this film. And some of the things that I've asked myself about this film, I have to admit, bugged me very much. But that does at least satisfy me, the conversion of matter into energy. And I think that's a pretty fascinating concept that this film does a really good job of like forcing you to question everything. I have no idea if what I just said made any sense.
That might have been too intellectual for us.
It might be.
I want to give a shout out to YouTube channel Alt-Shift-X. I don't know if any of you guys saw that yet. I've been a long time watcher just because I'm a big Game of Thrones fan, and he does a great job of breaking down Game of Thrones history and episodes. But he also has a video on Annihilation, and I feel like it's a really cool video. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. One of the concepts that I think really resonate, or at least really came clear to me, is just how much I did see this theme of self-destruction in the film, and how self-destructive the personalities of each character was. And especially when I think about even Natalie Portman's character, if that's supposed to be a reflection of just like the nature of people and like how people can be, I'm even more convinced like, wow, like this film is such a bummer. Like it's going to be way too hard for people to enjoy that on a mass with a mass appeal. But I do think it's a very, very compelling and very interesting concept.
The cancer metaphor makes a lot of sense to me too.
So one thing that I just wanted to bring up that I think is interesting is thinking about this thing, right? They sort of refer to it as though it has some sort of intelligence, right? When it's referred to, oh, it's making something new, but then she sort of like backpedals on it. I'm not sure if this thing should be considered like an entity, but more like a function. It's there to do a specific thing, and what it seems like is to figure out the genome or whatever around it and figure out what is the best, I guess, body plan, and then copy it. And Natalie Portman gets away, but she's there long enough where, again, when she gets back to the facility, she has the tattoos of her comrades. I think she has some of the mannerisms of them too. I didn't pay enough attention to it.
She was already changing because she tested her blood earlier in the film.
Right. So I think that enough of it got through her that the Shimmer was like, okay, I have this doppelganger that's already out there. We're good now. And that's why everything lights on fire. And that's why it's done. Because it's basically, and I hate saying this, it's basically sort of created its own Adam and Eve for something new. These two people, the doppelganger and the person who has been grossly infected by the Shimmer. But sort of, the fact that she makes it that far, it's sort of almost like the Shimmer is picking her out. And is like, you need to make it here so that, I can figure out what you are. And that's why it takes the blood. And once the blood goes in there, and my wife said too, at the end where Ventress just like becomes light and stuff, my wife was like, I don't understand what that is. And I still don't.
No, I don't know.
I have no idea.
That was going to be one of my questions for you, Eric, is like, what happened to Dr. Ventress?
What happened to Dr. Venture?
Dr. Venture.
A Psy Ventress?
And that the end of the film for me can seem pretty pretentious, right? Because you have those crystalline trees, and then you have like the bones. But I think I read somewhere that in the script, it's supposed to be described as the site of a massacre. So I'm wondering if those bones are of the first expeditions that went in there and suffered a similar fate that the guys did at the pool house. You know what I mean? Like it gets a little weird and it gets a little thing. But the crystalline trees, I think a cool theory on those is that when it landed, the first thing the Shimmer encountered was the trees, and it tried combining them with the sand. So what you have are kind of silicone life forms because it's refracting everything, right? It's just mashing all this stuff together to sort of see what works. Again, that's just my perspective, but I think that's a cool thing about this movie. You could just have conversations about it, and at the end of the day, every question is a good question.
I like your theory a lot about the Adam and Eve thing. I hadn't considered that before, but I think that almost starts to make the movie make sense for me, I think.
I appreciate that. That's a huge compliment, Guy. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, he said almost, Eric.
Almost. I get it. I know.
Calm down.
I think something else to consider too is that, like, in keeping with the Lovecraftian themes of the movie, I don't think that the Shimmer is meant to be like understood. I'm not sure we're supposed to be thinking that hard about it. Like, because I think the underlying theme of Lovecraft is like the pursuit of knowledge is what leads to the ruin of man. And I think that this is kind of like, that also ties into like the self-destructive nature of like humanity and all that stuff. So I'm just not sure we're supposed to be thinking about it that hard, but I do like how, Eric, your theory might have given me some closure on it.
It's a weird movie, dude. It's a weird movie.
The thing I like about the story is all the time she just says, I don't know. Because if you want to think of this as like an alien invasion, the chances of us understanding them, or remember when Wang is asking her, like, what did it want? And it's like the chances of us understanding an alien's like motivations are probably pretty slim. Obviously, what do I know? I mean, like, I don't know why Stadia just didn't think to give it like a Windows virus, like an Independence Day or something. I don't know. But I think it handles that part of it well. It doesn't try to explain things that I think. I almost wonder if I would think less of the movie if it tried to explain some of those things.
Fair. I think a lot of this movie does ride on the mystique and the unknown about it. I think you're absolutely right. If there was some kind of exposition dump at the end instead of whatever we got at the lighthouse, that would kind of be awful.
Eric, can you talk about the score? please. The score
Sure.
is phenomenal.
So a couple things that I noticed about the score. First off, the guitars, and I will say this until I'm blue in the face. The Last of Us, the music out of there has constantly been referenced. And so, because when they're walking around and you hear that guitar going, it's very reminiscent of The Last of Us, which has this similar melancholy, oppressive, sad, nothing's going right kind of vibe. But my favorite thing to talk about is at the end, where you have all those really crazy sounds, because I used to be a dubstep producer and a dubstep DJ, where what that is you're taking a sound, amplifying it, and again, I'm simplifying this process, and then you take a bunch of frequencies and you just have them move around. And as you do that, you capture that sample and then you move it again, and you keep doing that until you get those real like movements. And how appropriate for the end of that. Like there would have been no other sound design, no other music that would have been appropriate for that. And it still had melody. You know what I mean? Like after the blood goes in and it's like it got really creepy. At first it was sort of like, you know, oh, this thing is beautiful. And then after the blood goes in, it's just like, you know what I mean? Like the tone got more sinister, but everything about the music, dude, I got goosebumps thinking about it. It's such a good soundtrack. And I think it's very well, I think it's appropriate.
It's an incredible horror movie score, Eric. It really is.
Yeah. But like, not all of the score is scary.
No.
Some of it is, you know, and she even says, like, sometimes this stuff is beautiful. And it is.
I won't lie to you. I actually got a little concerned early on in the film when they're playing, like, CW pop music in the first 5 minutes. I was like, oh, boy.
The melancholy song that's on all of the soap operas and stuff. Like,
yeah.
I've heard that song before, used in the exact same way.
Yeah, but the score in the last like 30-40 minutes is perfect for me.
It's so good, dude. And it really, you know, I think people still use it in like TikToks and stuff like that, or it's something that's very similar to signify this mysterious, weird stuff. But for me, it was cool to see something like that. You know, I had made stuff like that. I had never seen it used cinematically in a way. You know what I'm saying? Like the sound design that you hear was typically used for like drum and bass and, you know, music that would be played in clubs and stuff like that. So it was interesting to see it here, but it was very appropriate.
Kai, did you like the score?
Yeah, I was a big fan of it. I like the memes that came out of like the
Yeah,
it's kind of like the modern like X-Files,
which is so funny because I feel like people don't know it came from this movie.
Yeah,
that might
I feel like the average person knows that.
That might be the most lasting legacy of this film, right? That people don't even know,
which is so unfortunate.
Yeah, I also like I'm gonna call it like country music, but like the country music twang that plays like when they're in like the forest and stuff like that. I like that too.
Am I wrong in saying that's similar to The Last of Us?
I see that. I see that from the first game.
I felt that vibe hard.
I believe you. I've never played it.
You should watch the HBO show, Patrick. You don't have to play it.
I saw a little bit of it.
Spoiler alert. The next big video I'm putting out is for The Last of Us 1 Ungrounded. So you can just watch that. You'll get the whole story.
Okay. I mean, I've seen a little bit of the show, so I know what it's about.
Yeah, but the music is, you know, very guitar oriented.
Was it in the second one you actually get to play a guitar?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow,
yeah.
The highlight of any video game.
It's just part of it.
I know. I'm being a dick.
You don't get the emotional impact either. Like, I'm not gonna get into it, but anyway.
All right, we have to talk about the ending of this film. Although, I guess really quick, I think it's for the most part well filmed. They're doing a lot of color correcting in this, which I think it's going to age in a particular way.
What did I tell you, Pat? It kind of felt like an Instagram filter in the 2010s.
Again, this is me just defending it. I think that was intentional. Because when you're in the shimmer, right, and the sun is filtering through the leaves and stuff like that, I think it's supposed to look weird.
Digital?
Almost like, well, I guess not. But my response to that initially, what I wanted to say was, why not? What would it look like, right, if you were walking through a space that wasn't just refracting light, but refracting everything around you?
All right, Eric, it would look like an Instagram filter.
Maybe
let
it would.
go. No,
Maybe
I mean,
no, I see what you're saying. You know me, dude. Even if I agree with you, I'm going to play devil's advocate.
I will say, in the film's defense, the production design is amazing. Kai, you were talking about like all the effects of just what the environment is doing to everything. It's really
the imagery.
effective.
Very well done.
Yeah,
I think it's a very effects heavy, right? So I think considering that, pretty decent job.
And I don't think, but like it's effects heavy, but it's not like it doesn't look bad. It looks pretty believable, all things considered.
yeah. I think they saved the CGI budget for the last 15 minutes, which was like wise on
To
their
create
part.
the Pepsi Man.
But the bear, I mean,
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Oh my gosh.
I still think the bear scene is iconic, though. That is
I think it's a very unsettling
God.
scene.
But that's what I mean. That's what it's there for.
I think very,
if
there's ever if there was ever anyone asking like, what's this film about? It's like, I'd say, well, you could watch this bear scene and see if you'd be interested.
Yeah. I wanted to mention this, and I'm not sure if it's just me sort of like maybe thinking about it too much, but a lot of the gore that isn't the camera, I feel like it's really quick.
It's not a very, it's not a very brutal film.
Like you see her throat ripped out when she's dead.
I mean,
after the bear
it's
attack,
gory,
and then
but it's not gratuitous.
Right. You see it, and it's almost like if you're not paying enough attention, you don't know what you're seeing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's not over the top.
Yeah. Which I thought that was because this place is brutal, and we see that, but I'm glad that it wasn't over. It didn't rely on the gore as part of the horror. I would say maybe it overdid it a little too much in the pool scene. I always forget it, and I always go into it. I'm like, I don't remember.
It's gross. I mean, they go into the horror movie tropes a little bit. I mean, the only one I didn't really like is the whole like, and I knew it was going to happen early in the film. The first time I saw it, I'm like, oh, one of them's going to go crazy and try to kill the rest of them, and it's very clearly supposed to be the paramedic, played by Gina Rodriguez. She's the wild card. It's boring.
That's just a bit more generic.
How many horror movies have done that, where like someone goes crazy and tries to kill everyone?
Do you think she might have? Do you think it was reasonable though? After
it was telegraphed.
I understand.
Yeah. Was it reasonable? Sure, but it was. I everything else in this movie kept me guessing, and I thought it was really unique and original. And that was like the one thing. I don't know if it was from the book, but like, well, let's just have someone go crazy and try to kill everybody else.
They telegraphed it a lot, and I will say that Natalie Portman's character really did nothing to try and stop it. When she's like, I'll go find her alone. Why? Why didn't you just let the paramedic come with you to go find the body? Right? I mean, that didn't make much sense. But again, I feel like each of these women were on their personal journeys, and everyone else was getting in the way of each other. Realistically, they all had their demons. They were all going there to, in some way or another, self-destruct / fight their demons, right? Or confront them in some way. I think that was sort of the message, because
then they all haunted. Become Natalie Portman in the end.
So yeah. And that's probably the best. That's probably the best outcome.
Dr. Ventress turns into a shimmering cloud, which according to Wikipedia is called a mandelbulb.
What?
I'm not making this up. In the Wikipedia synopsis, it says, Ventress explains that the shimmer will swallow everything. She then disintegrates into a shimmering cloud that absorbs a drop of blood from Lena's face and changes into a faceless, shimmering humanoid that mimics Lena's movements, and the link out to Shimmer and Cloud is to something called a mandelbulb.
So I don't know what that means.
Mandelbulb.
I don't either. Well, actually, Eric, it's a 3-dimensional fractal.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. I didn't know it was called a mandelbulb, but like fractal sort of things. And again, I think the reason why they did that is because what she's seeing might be the only way her brain can comprehend what she's seeing. I think that, and again, the fact that it's called a mandelbulb is hilarious. But I think that last scene does a really good job about depicting the indescribable.
Yeah, classic mandelbulb ending.
That's just classic mandelbulb
that is
ending.
so mandelbulb.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought when I saw it. I'm like, of course it's a mandelbulb. It reminded me of, I think I said this before and no one reacted. Maybe you didn't hear me. One of the screensavers from like Windows 98 that would just like morph in and out. I'm like, that's what the mandelbulb is, clearly, right?
Does anyone here still use screensavers?
No. I do.
I used to, I guess I used to always have a mandelbulb.
We all had a mandelbulb at some point if you used a Windows product in the 90s.
It's crazy there's going to be kids growing up who have never heard of that. There's going to be people listening to this who have no idea what you're talking about.
None. No, they won't. And then you have to explain the purpose of a screensaver. Like, well, if the screen would get frozen, it could, just stick there and stay there forever. So they created these things to prevent that from happening called screensavers.
Was that the point of screensavers? They didn't want the screen to just stay there forever?
Those old school monitors, if you kept
right.
them on the same image for long enough, it would just kind of like
burn.
Not freeze. What's the word?
Yeah,
it would burn in. Yeah.
Like an old.
It's like OLED.
Yeah,
that's right.
So that was to answer your question. Why do I still use a screensaver? I couldn't tell you.
It's aesthetic.
The last screensaver I used,
nostalgia. Yeah.
The last one I used was the Matrix, like the green things.
So were we talking about the ending of the movie? Is that how we got on the mandelbulb?
Yeah, so she kills the doppelganger, right? And then burns down the entire Shimmer with one little phosphorus grenade.
So
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. You go, Kai.
I was going to say, I think this is the only thing this is like one of the few things that's like not ambiguous to me. But I think that by killing like the main entity, she basically effectively stopped the Shimmer there. But I think later on, there's more that crash land, right? So there could be more occurrences.
That's in the original script.
Oh, gotcha.
In the original version of the script, more meteors are shown crashing to Earth, and it's left completely ambiguous as to which version of Lena makes it out.
Gotcha. Well, I think in the actual movie, it's pretty clear that it's the original Lena that makes it out.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I'm pretty sure that because she killed like the main alien, that the rest of the Shimmer just disappeared. That's how I understood it.
Yeah, I see it as this is original but transformed Lena, Natalie Portman.
Happily married Lena now. No, she'll never
Which
cheat
again,
on her
it's
husband
all a
now.
metaphor. It's still the same person, but is it? She went through so much. Are you even the same person?
I found it fascinating how did the doppelganger of her husband find her because her husband told it to find her? Remember, right before he blows himself up, he's like, find Lena.
So I think so. We have to sort of reference the book a little bit because what happens in the book, and I could be wrong, but my understanding is there's more than just one doppelganger that has come back from Area X. So like these guys go in and then they show up at their family's doors, but they're a little bit different. So in the book, it's sort of like this thing is making doppelgangers of the people that it comes in contact with. And the people who can't become doppelgangers, they just die. And again, I think in the movie where the difference is that, again, this thing is just land somewhere. It's not intelligent. I think it serves a function. And its function is to make something new. But in order to do that in the quickest way possible, in the most effective way possible, it needs to bang. Well, kind of. It needs to figure out what is top dog. How can it make the top dog more top dog by looking at everything around it and maybe even merging a bunch of strong female characters together into Natalie Portman. And then No,
I can't blame it.
Yeah,
I like
Mhm.
Natalie Portman. She's hot.
it's hard though because like what I can try to ascribe reason to anything that it does, but the point is that we don't know what it's doing. And even if it could be explained to us, it probably still wouldn't make sense. It's not. She said, I don't think it wants. I don't think it does anything. I don't think it feels. I think it's just a function. Almost like a machine. It looks organic, but it could be intelligent as the AI that we have now is, in the sense that it's programmed to do a specific thing. But because it's so far beyond our comprehension, what it's doing is so weird and wild and crazy and seems hostile when it's just doing its thing. And again, it's kind of an allegory to humanity, because we kind of do it. We show up, we alter the environment to the way that we want it. We conglomerate animals into the way that we function, either as pets, as food, as livestock, as, workhorses for farms. I know I'm kind of getting off the rails with this analogy, but that's a nice way of saying yes.
Well,
but I think if you talk to the original author, and I think if you talk to Alex Garland, I don't know if they disagree with me. I know that's a bold statement, but I have been drinking a bit. So bold statements coming your way.
This could go on for hours, this discussion, because there's no clear answer for anything. I have a ton more questions, but I don't even think they're worth asking because there's no answers.
That's true. That question would be a great question, but that's all it would be.
Now he's a philosophizer.
Dude, I wanted to switch my major. It's a huge point of contention. I was like...
You can always go back to school.
I looked it up, by the way.
No.
I looked it up.
Not again.
Around Annihilation's other definition on conversion of a particle and an antiparticle. And you mentioned not too sure what an antiparticle is. I looked it up. Usually they're married to uncle particles.
Oh, I fucking hate you. Oh my god.
Is that what that was? Oh man.
Is this a good segue to Did We Like It?
Yeah, there's no way.
This is a good segue into I resign as your producer.
Oh, Eric, I hope this wasn't too painful for you.
Oh no, it was just that. It's just that joke.
Was the stab to the heart. That was the
all right. Well, we're wrapping this up.
That joke was
now.
The phosphorus to the Pepsi
yes.
Man.
I think less of this film now because of the Pepsi Man reference. Eric, you have to go first now to give your rating. You don't have a choice.
All right. I understand all the critiques that y'all have levied about this film, and the fact of the matter is that because not enough people, I think, know about this film. I mean, everyone that I show it to, that actually, watches it and engages with it, enjoys it. But, you have opened my eyes to certain flaws in the film that maybe I wasn't paying enough attention to. That being said, I think this film is important, and I think that if more people thought in the way that Alex Garland and Jeff Vandermeer thought about, because you said they were both kind of made at the same time, right? Like the book and the movie were sort of tandem.
They wrote the screenplay as the book was coming out.
Right. So but that's very close, right?
Yeah.
So the book, I think we'd be better off artistically in terms of movies if we gave more movies like this a chance. And A24 is doing that, and doing that brilliantly. There are a lot of weird, interesting, and new films coming out, particularly in the horror genre. I think it's hard because this doesn't really fall into just one category of movie. It's sci-fi, it's horror, it's sort of a thriller, there's drama, there's character studies, there's a bunch of weird stuff going on. And it's difficult to pin down. But I feel for it in a way because when I would make music, everyone would ask me, oh, like, what kind of music do you make? And I'm like, I don't know. I just make music. And I feel like this is the film equivalent to that. Like, I don't know what this is. I just made something cool. And I know that's hard from a monetary standpoint to support, but I think more people should. I'm very biased about this, and I will give it an A. It is one of my very favorite movies. I think through all the flaws and all the confusion, I think a lot of the confusion is intentional. I know that's a sad excuse for, giving a movie a good score, but similar to Spirit, I would recommend it, but this one I personally give very high score. It's in my top 5 movies. It's weird, it's interesting. You probably haven't seen something exactly like it before. It might not be your cup of tea, but it damn well sure is mine. So it gets an A from me.
I even this out for us by failing it.
All right.
Just kidding, maybe not.
Well, I came into this session ready to give it a D- because I don't really like this movie, and I probably would not watch it again. I regret watching it a second time, actually. But I will say Eric's explanation of what the ending means kind of helped uplift it a bit. So I'm actually going to give it a D+ instead. And yeah, I think the story and the sci-fi elements are nonsensical. The horror elements aren't really there, but I think it is carried a lot by how weird and interesting a lot of the scenes look, and how good the score is. So yeah, a D+ from me, I guess.
That's so interesting.
Ooh,
I love it.
Now you're wondering, where am I going to rank this? How am I going to balance this out? This type of film is not my cup of tea, Eric. I don't like weird sci-fi. But I really enjoyed this film. I've seen this, I think, 4 times now. And every time I've seen it, I've noticed different things about it, but my appreciation has somewhat grown a little bit because of more things that I noticed, like the tattoos moving, like the very clever camera shot early on of Lena holding her husband's hand in front of the glass of water and it's refracting through the glass. It's really, everything in this movie is very deliberate, and I appreciate all the details in it. I think it's really well acted. I love Natalie Portman in this, even though there's really not much to like about her character. She kind of sucks. But when Portman's good, she's one of the best around. She really is. This is one of my favorite roles of hers. It's a very unsettling movie, even though it's I wouldn't call it scary, but I do think it's a very effective horror movie just because of how creepy it is. And you're just uncomfortable. It's kind of a tough watch. It's not a movie that I would watch a lot. You have to be in kind of a mood for it. There's a lot of ambiguity with the plot, and that bugs me with a lot of movies. It was much more deliberate here, that it didn't bother me as much. I pointed out the questions that I have that I think are iffy. It's just so visually interesting and unique. I've never seen anything quite like it, although it does remind me of other films that I've mentioned, Prometheus, Fear. What's that other crap you called out, Anton? All those movies are crap, and this is so much more clever than those movies. I definitely would recommend this. I would definitely see it again. I just have to be in the right mood for it. I would say if you're going to watch this film, watch it more than one time, because if you watch it once, you're going to miss a lot of things. This was tough to rate for me, but I'm going to give it a B. I really do like it. I think it's a very well-made, well-acted, well-crafted movie, even if I have some questions about it. I've seen it 4 times now, and I still have no idea what happened in this movie, but based on the research that I've done, and we've been talking now for, an hour and a half, no one else does either, so I feel better about that. Yeah, it's a B for me. I really do like this film.
Films that have audiences asking lots of questions about what's happening on screen can end up being very pretentious. And I think that one of the hallmarks of this film is it asks a lot of really big questions, but does not at all ever feel pretentious. And for a big budget movie released by Paramount in a category of film that is very unique, especially to this day, I find a lot of merit going to a film with such large concepts that is able to land very well. And when I say land well, these are concepts that are still very haunting when I think about them. Really big questions, but it's been marred by the fact that, of course, it's not a simple cookie cutter horror story that can be easily sold in the summertime. Now, I don't hold that against the film. I think that the film is really enjoyable. I think that there's so much here that reminds me a lot of one of my favorite authors, Haruki Murakami, who writes about very troubled, imperfect individuals and sets it upon a world that is filled with magical realism. You look at things and think, did I just see that? And I felt like that was my reaction to a lot of this film. Did I just see that? And in the best way possible. Parts of it I didn't love. Sometimes I felt like the pacing was a little off for me. The open-ended questions did end up being a lot of questions, but it's part of the fun of being able to interpret. It's very Lynchian, and I love having that opportunity to interpret. So I landed the same place as Pat. It's a B for me. I think that it's one of a kind when it comes to sci-fi horror. I will definitely come back to it, and I'm curious to see, or I stand by my earlier statement, I just want to see more Alex Garland in Hollywood.
Well, that's it for Annihilation. Eric, Kai, despite your difference in opinions of this film, this is, I feel like, a great discussion.
This is great.
Yeah.
Kai honestly opened my eyes to a lot of stuff that I was I don't want to say rose-colored glasses for a 2018 movie, but like I do hold this movie in high regard, and in that instance, I don't think about it as critically as I probably should. So, but even against all that, I still love it. So,
Yeah,
I appreciate it, Kai.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have friends who like it a lot. No, I have friends who definitely consider this like a top tier movie, but I think at the end of the day, it's just not for me, probably. But yeah, and I mean, like, I think your explanation at the end helped me kind of fill in some pieces of the puzzle too. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, that is it for this week's edition of Why Wasn't It Better? Thanks for listening, and see you next time.